Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
You're watching the Patreon bonus stories. All right, so let's talk about Tesla Semi at Giga Berlin. Check out this video.
I really love that we've leaned into making Giga Berlin have its own identity. It's an awesome site. There's been a lot of investment into the facility to make great space for people to hang out, as well as improvements in the factory. The last 2 days have been great. The team here has been incredibly welcoming, and there's an obvious amount of passion and excitement for having the Semi over here in Europe. I got a lot of really great questions. The team is super engaged, and I was really impressed with the overall eagerness and how much people want to see this on the road. It's clear that there's a huge amount of potential for the product from the market, but also an equal amount of enthusiasm here at Giga Berlin for the Semi.
So that's Jim Priestley. He's the head of Semi. He went over to Berlin to kind of introduce Semi over there. I think this is one of those stories that, of course, during weeks like We Robot and catching rockets that no one talks about, Elon said Tesla Semi will be available worldwide. This is a big story. Obviously, it's not as big as catching a rocket, but trucks live everywhere in the world. And this truck, the Tesla Semi, will work in Europe. And so that's two huge markets that Semi is going to live in, and probably eventually China. So it's going to be a bigger and bigger story. It's just that no one but you guys knows about it and no one believes it. But when they turn this on, and they are turning it on, right? They're working on the Tesla Semi factory right now in Reno, Nevada. And so when that factory is fully up and running, which probably only be a year or so, this is going to go off the hook. The reason they're bringing this to Giga Berlin, in my opinion, I have no facts to back this up, is that I believe as they expand Giga Berlin, they're going to start making semis there too.
And I also just want to point out that Tesla is the only truck manufacturer in the world that also has an autonomy stack.
Mm-hmm. And a robot stack. All the things you need for trucking.
I know that there's trucking companies that are working on autonomy, and that they have like, oh, there's this one plant that we have, and the truck drives a mile to the thing and back. Yeah, this is a little different. And I know that when they unveiled the Semi, autonomous driving was nowhere close to where it is today even. But they talked about convoying, where you'd have like a human driver will drive, and then there will be 3 or 4 other semis behind it. Yeah. What if there's no human in that first truck?
Exactly.
Something to think about.
Huge cost of the market is the driver. This is the number one job in America right now in almost every state is truck driver. That will very quickly become not true at all. It's going to change everything. And Tesla's going to be at the forefront of it. So we talked about Omid Afshar in the main show. He is kind of Tesla's right-hand man for the past few years. Elon had put him in charge of building Giga Texas, and guess how that went? Really well. So he was promoted. So he's basically the number 2. He's a big player, and you've probably never heard of him. And he put out this post, which is pinned to his X. And I just wanted to read it because I think this gives you a really good sense of who Elon is and who Omid is. Quote, I was with Elon nearly every single day during Model 3 hell. This included Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, his birthday, and nearly missing his brother's wedding. He left the factory to fly straight there, barely making it as he was helping resolve production challenges and being present with the associates and the whole team. From countless firsthand experiences, I cannot begin to describe the immense personal sacrifice and commitment made by Elon directly from the front line. I took the photo below on the day of his birthday at close to midnight. We were stationed at Paint Ingress, Station 1911, resolving the constraint for the entire production system. So there's Elon sitting alone on the floor trying to figure out how to make it work. The tenacity and willingness to perform any job and drive us to excel is unwavering. When I started Giga Texas, Elon slept on site for a period of time. His direct ask, which people on the team didn't even believe at first, quote, your goal is to not let me sleep. The machines need to be running 24/7, unquote. It was an awesome fire to have lit and drove all of us. From the initial site you see below with mining pits that were 30 feet deep to producing 1,000 cars a week in less than 2 years. And I'm really happy to see this guy as Elon's right-hand man. I can tell he's a lot like over at SpaceX. There's a guy who Elon sends in, and his name is escaping me now, Tony Giancosa, when Elon hits a brick wall somewhere or a problem, he sends in some of these special force kind of members who go in and they're so smart and they know how to get things done that it doesn't even matter if they know that particular thing. They just know how to get things done. They report back to Elon every day. And that works for him really well. He has now got that guy for North America and Europe. And my guess is that with Tom Zhu, I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he's really good at what he's good at. And I think the reason he got sent back to China is he needs him there. But that this guy is the guy you basically send in anywhere in the world to solve problems. And he knows how to do it now because he's been through Giga Texas, through Model 3 Hell. And to have people like this, you can talk all day long about, oh, well, this guy left Tesla and this guy left Tesla. That's fine. Those are like sergeants and stuff. You can replace those.
Every month that Omid continues to work for Tesla, I know that he's going to leave at some point, but every month we get him to continue working for Tesla, that's huge. That should be a news story in itself. Every first of the month we should have another Omid's still at Tesla.
Yep.
That's huge. That is like years at other companies. And that's the crazy part for me, seeing Tesla and SpaceX. And again, read the book Reentry by where is it?
Eric Berger.
By Eric Berger. Do we? Oh, right. We've lent out all our copies so to let other people read them. It perfectly sums it up. And when you actually sit down and you do the math and see how much work that people are doing at those companies, you see why Tesla is so far ahead. It's like they have 4 times as many as employees.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's like they're
and
in
wait till they have Optimus.
It's like they're in some. It's like everyone else is in slow motion, and Tesla is sprinting full speed.
Well, and just think when they have Optimus, which is the equivalent of 3 times more employees, that'll be like having 12 times more employees. It's insane.
It's an insane amount of stuff that they're able to accomplish, and you have to focus on why Elon is doing this. Because again, if the goal was to get rich, he's accomplished that.
Right.
He is one of the richest people on Earth, and depending on what Tesla's doing, sometimes he is the richest person on Earth. If he wanted to live on a private island, doing whatever the hell he wanted to, he absolutely could have done that
he could buy some
decades
countries.
ago.
Yep.
Okay? Yes, he could buy entire countries right now with his wealth. He doesn't want to be rich. I know that everyone else does. Oh, I want to be rich.
Oh,
my life would be easy.
As we heard the other day, he doesn't want to be president. There's so many things that we all grow up wanting to be. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to get to Mars.
Because why do you want to be rich? Well, my life would be easy. Is Elon's life easy? No. What is his goal? Because he will not make any sense to you unless you understand his goal.
Yes.
His goal, which he says all the time and everybody ignores, is to make life multiplanetary. Because we haven't seen life anywhere else in the solar system or the galaxy.
And that's why you don't understand him, because I think if you asked 10,000 people what their goal is, none of them would say to get to Mars. They would say all sorts of things. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a basketball player. I want to be a great father. They would not say, I want to get to Mars. So he doesn't make sense to everyone because you've never heard that before.
Right. And you don't understand how much he cares about that goal. So much so that when people get in his way, he hates that person. And you hate people who get in your way.
Well, and let me ask you this. Would you put your own life on the line? Because Elon said the other night at one of the speeches that he gave in Philadelphia that he knows that he's way more at risk now for being shot, but he thinks he has to. I mean, I honestly can't imagine anyone saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to increase the likelihood of my death by doing this or this. That's a huge existential risk he's taking just to move this forward.
Right.
So you need to understand that. And I think this next story also helps with this. Okay. So take a look at all of the federal investigations into Elon's companies. This chart really helps to actually see it all for the first time. So we've got cabinet departments, okay? Transportation, Justice, Labor, Interior, and Agriculture. Those 5 cabinet departments all have active investigations into Elon's companies. Now let's go to independent agencies, or they're supposed to be independent. National Labor Relations Board, Equal Opportunity Commission, EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, FCC, Federal Communications Commission, FTC, Federal Trade Commission. They are all carrying out investigations and probes. Now, this costs money for Elon's companies, right? Because he's got to get lawyers and he has to do all the things they want to do. But also, think about us taxpayers. You now have thousands of federal employees probing into Elon's companies. And why? All because President Biden and the Democratic Party want to stop Elon. And Elon posted,
lawfare with diagrams.
I just think this is insane because think of any other big company out there. If they had this many investigations into them, by now, they would all be, there'd be trials, there'd be arrests, there'd be fines. There are none. There never are. NHTSA always, I mean, I didn't even run the story this week of, NHTSA's looking into 2.4 million Tesla car, because it's all going to be, it's all just, I guess, because their boss told them they had to do it. It's all because politically they have to do this. This is their cover. It's all a waste. I mean, you remember the glass house? Where's that investigation, Department of Justice? They haven't canceled it, so we're still paying for it. There is no glass house.
The crazy part is, because Elon wants to go to Mars, right? It means that it's such a huge overarching thing. If he wanted to make the Taj Mahal a 1-to-1 scale out of toothpicks, he wouldn't be bothering anybody, right? He wouldn't be getting in anybody's way. He wouldn't be disrupting anything. He'd be sitting in a room, a giant room with toothpicks and glue.
Well, and also, if he was doing something and it was so hard that the government was, throwing all these probes into him, he'd be like, you know what? I'm not going to make enough money to make this worth it. I'll stop doing it. He's not stopped doing because it's not about the money. It's about getting to Mars. And so some of these companies, yes, they have to make money to be able to afford the starships, so Starlink and all that. But I mean, imagine if you had an FCC and an FAA that instead of like slowing down Starship and slowing down Starlink, we were able to expand faster, because obviously he can. We would have more people connected by Starlink. We would have launching rockets. And so you might be thinking, well, I don't give a shit about rockets. I'm not going to Mars. Okay, let me ask you this. Would you like to be able to fly around the globe in half an hour? I would. It would change life as we know it. If I could fly to my friend's house in Taiwan and have lunch with them and then fly home. And you might be like, well, that'd just be for rich people. No, is it for rich people now to take flights? 1 billion people a year take flights. So no, but we did just spend how many billions of dollars to build 1,600 feet of rail, high-speed rail with no rail on it yet in California? That's your taxpayer dollars. And are you happy about that?
Elon told us this week how much money he needs to raise to build a self-sustaining city on Mars.
$25 billion a year.
It's $1 trillion. Okay, he needs $1 trillion to do that. Normally, would have cost a quadrillion dollars, $1 quadrillion, which is an unfathomable amount of money.
$1 trillion is only a fraction of our GDP. It's a very achievable number, especially since that's over 40 years.
And what you have to keep in mind is also that GDP number should be continuing to grow.
Exactly. Well,
if you look at the GDP and you go like, well, that's all we have to work with. You are wrong. We can create more value.
That means that I just want to place this idea in your head. For $25 billion a year, if you can get it to that price, he can do it all himself. You don't have to pay your taxes to do it.
And
he can do it himself.
That's what he's aiming to do, because he knows that he's probably not going to get support
for
this very important thing. Now, it's important to him. I think it should be important to you. If you zoom out far enough, you will understand that you can't keep living on the same rock and expect not to be slapped in the face by the universe. Okay? If we get hit by an asteroid, there's one projected to hit the Earth in 20 years. If we don't have seeds on another planet. I know everyone talks about like, well, why would anyone want to live on Mars? Okay, why would we as a society want to have a base on Mars or something like that? Well, it's because if humanity was, as we know it, was wiped out here on Earth, the Earth would still be habitable. It might not be immediately habitable when the asteroid hits. It might take a few years for things to settle down and for the giant clouds of dust to disperse and for the ice age to end. But eventually, the Earth would go back to being habitable for another billion or so years.
It wasn't always fun for humans living on this planet. I mean, if you gave me the choice now of living in a cave with fire, I'd be like, do I have to?
If you wipe out all the humans, they don't grow back.
Exactly.
So you need some human seeds on another planet to reseed the Earth with humanity and with consciousness.
Well, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe most people today don't give a shit. I mean, maybe they just are like, I don't care if the humanity lives or dies. And I think that's part of the problem. He does. And so if you're not on that same thinking plane as him, you just don't get him at all. And that's the problem. I hate people calling him evil when they just don't get him. He's actually the least evil person I can think of. He cares more about humanity than anyone I can think of. And yet people keep trying to give him attributes of evil billionaire.
Right.
There's plenty of evil billionaires out there. He's not one of them.
And some of the things that he does, like make money, look evil if you think that making money makes you evil.
Right.
But being a billionaire doesn't inherently make you evil, because I can think of a number of things that could accidentally turn you into a billionaire, or in this case, not so accidentally. He knows he needs to be very wealthy in order to fund us getting to Mars.
Right. I mean,
that's the thing. And if you're like, well, then why is he supporting Trump? Because Trump is such an evil person. it's because he knows that Trump is going to help get him to Mars. It's just going to buy him another 4 years of essentially, hopefully, speeding things up. Why do you think Elon wants to increase the GDP of this country? Why do you think he wants to spend less on the government? It's because he doesn't want the government to collapse.
Right.
He doesn't want our trillions and trillions of dollars in debt to overwhelm the government, because he knows that this country is the one country that's probably going to be able to get us to Mars.
Exactly.
And that's all he cares about. It's insane when you actually look at it that way, because otherwise you're looking at any other ulterior motive and you're going like, oh, it's because he hates this or because he hates this person. And it's like, it's not really true. It's just that he sees people like who work at the FAA and the people who sent them after him, like Joe Biden and the people who snubbed him at EV events and are trying to actively slow down EV adoption, as the evil people. And if you can look at it that way, if you think of it that way, you go, oh, I can see why Elon does what he does. And you don't have to necessarily completely agree with him, because maybe you don't care about going to Mars, but you can at least see his motivations. That's, to me, the important part. He wants to go to Mars. Anyone who gets in his way, he hates. It's very simple from that perspective.
Let's move on to this next story about a pipeline fire in Houston, Texas. Take a look at this.
In the LaPorte area, we're guesstimating the flames right now are at least 300 feet tall. We're up here at 900 feet looking down on it, but as you can see, it is a massive fire. We picked it up more than 10 miles away, all the way to the other side of downtown Houston. And as you can see, it is a massive fire. I don't believe that I've seen one like this from a pipeline coming out of the ground ever in the Houston area. It's got to be, I don't know, a 12-inch, maybe a 15, 20-inch pipeline.
Again,
Oh, no. EVs caused... No, they didn't.
yeah, and so you probably didn't hear about this in the national news. This was on a local channel because, it's just another fire, first of all. It's kind of boring. And also, they don't really want you to know about it, especially their big, puppet masters in the oil companies. They don't want you to think about this, that just oil pipelines can blow up. We've reported on many of these over the past few weeks that just threaten neighborhoods, kill people, but let's not talk about it.
And you might be going like, well, this is just because it's in Houston. There are maps where you can find natural gas pipelines.
They go through the whole country.
You're not far from one.
Right.
I hate to break it to you. You're not far from one.
Do you know how many solar farm explosions there were last week? None. Never are. Let's go into this next story about completely covered windows. FSD?
Left side, including the entire.
He has his sun shield up.
And then he has his sun shield.
Yeah, I'm trying to get his.
Right?
I'm trying to get his license plate.
Probably.
Oh, he's coming. Oh, he's coming
Oh,
up.
but that's the thing. He has his like. Oh my gosh, yeah, let's let him go. That's right. Oh my gosh.
We get the plate.
9JJU
017.
I think it's a 017.
Yeah.
Okay.
But some things you don't.
I should start by saying, don't do that. But cool. Don't do it. Don't do it. No reason to
Well,
do
you know
that.
what I think is interesting?
Yeah.
We've done a test where we drive on the highway in FSD, which allows us to pay more attention to other people around us. We're still driving the car. We're not doing what that guy did. And it lets us do a survey of how many people are on their phones. And we generally come up with numbers around 40%. You guys know this is true, okay? Things were getting safer for a while, and then as soon as texting and all that started, it got worse. We have over 32,000 deaths in the United States every year. That's just the U.S. every year because of automobiles. We have 1 million deaths worldwide. No one ever talks about it. I mean, I think if I introduced a new thing, like if I was like, this bee creates 1 million deaths a year in the world, it would be the number one story, right? No one talks about it because we just grew up with it. You should not drive that way that guy did. But what if people were commenting and writing down license plates of people texting while they were driving as much as this? We might be able to put an end to that illegal thing, which kills people every year.
Because I want to point out, when you see someone driving and they're doing this, their windows may as well be completely black.
Exactly.
They may as well be taped up with all the newspaper in the world because they aren't seeing shit.
Well-
And they don't have any cameras looking out. They don't have anything that's going to protect them at all.
Well, so, the other day there was a car flipped over on Route 3 here in Massachusetts, and my dad was like, how does a car flip over? And so I researched that accident. Turns out it's what I thought it was. The guy was texting. I think what happens is you're paying attention and something gets pretty interesting, right? And when you look up, what do? You make a over movement to, avoid this. You're about to rear
Crash
end
into
someone or whatever.
someone, yeah.
So you turn the wheel more than you've ever done before at that speed. You have not been trained on that, okay? I just want to point out that most of us drivers are actually undertrained. That's why German drivers, for instance, are way better, because they go onto courses with a trained driver. They put helmets on. They do things with the car that they will probably never do so that they can understand the physics of it, right? Well, on a highway, if you do this to the wheel at highway speeds, something horrible is going to happen. You probably will flip your car, which means you've now affected all these other drivers, right? That's going on every single day in every single state, and no one talks about it. But one person drives with FSD in a car, and it's, oh my God.
They didn't get into an accident.
Right. Who's the bigger threat?
Because this person who did the wrong thing, but they didn't put all this paper up in their car and then drive down that one road and then take it all down. They got to their destination. Right. I don't know if maybe at some point they said, oh, I should, and they pulled something down. Maybe they did that. But my guess is that they did that entire drive in full self-driving.
The other funny thing is, in a couple of years when robovans are on the road and cybercabs are on the road, no one's going to give a shit because no one is going to be driving. And so it's just funny that this is the last couple of years where this is actually even going to be funny.
And that 30,000 deaths a year number could start to drop.
It will.
And I know that you're not going to feel it because it's a non-thing that happens. When someone in your life has a car accident, and if they ever do, I hope that they're fine. Most of the time, though, that's an expensive repair. The car's totaled. As we ramp up in severity, they're injured. They're seriously injured. They have to go to the hospital. They have weeks of recovery. That's workman's comp. That's all sorts of things that all of a sudden society has to. Worst case, they die. Worst case, they kill somebody else. All of this is all bad. When you start to roll that back, you're not going to see any of that because just like today, hopefully, nobody you knew got into a car accident.
Yep.
But the chances are as high as they've practically ever been that they will and that they'll be hurt.
Yep.
And when we start to roll that back, we may not feel it, but it'll start to not affect you and affect everybody else.
Well, and the other thing is, if cars weren't as safe as they are inside with airbags and all that, the deaths would be way higher, probably 3-4 times higher. And so if we reached 100,000+ deaths a year, people would start to care for some reason. But because it's like we've gotten used to this rate, we're like, we don't seem to care.
I think the people would start to care and then they'd stop to care. They'd stop caring after a certain period of time because then we would just accept that that's what the
How come
level
we have
would be.
mothers against drunk driving, but we don't have mothers against texting while driving? Like, it makes no sense to me because that is worse. I mean, sad to say, it's actually worse. It's
Pretty
like
soon-
having
and
40% of the people driving around drunk.
You know what I want? Mothers against driving.
Yeah.
Just make the acronym correct.
Yep.
Just call it MAD.
Yep.
Mothers against driving. We don't need to drive anymore.
Yep.
Very soon. And when we don't have to drive, there will be less fatalities.
Exactly.
It's so obvious. And if a person texting every day can go many months without getting into an accident, you really think that a full self-driving computer can't do the same thing?
Exactly. Let's go on to this. I thought this was astounding. Cernovich said one of the most revealing Elon Musk videos ever is when he was showing off some rocket project and someone asked him, and this was Tim Dodd, if he was using some method to launch them. I forget the details. Elon paused, laughed, said no, he wasn't doing it that way, but probably should. No ego whatsoever. So take a look at this video.
You don't even need a cold gas thruster system. You already have hot gas.
But this is only for the booster, right?
Yes. Although arguably, now you mention it, we might be wise to do this for the ship too. We're gonna fix that.
Jeez.
I'd say that's like one of the biggest improvements that we've made. It occurred to me while I was explaining it to you. I was like, wait, what are we doing?
So that was Tim Dodd from Everyday Astronaut. And he gave Elon an idea. And as you could see, Elon was like, oh, that's a good idea. And Elon posted critical feedback as a gift. You know that if you ask most CEOs, hey, like, why are you doing it this way? They'd be like, well, because we have experts and we know what's best and you're an idiot. He talking to a very intelligent person, said, yeah, no, that's a good idea. And now he took that idea, and he's proud to say that he took that idea from someone else. Like, that is astounding, that he has all of the right qualities of a person, not so much ego that he can't say, hey, this is a better way to do it. That's why he keeps moving forward. He doesn't go into meetings with his team and go, I have to be the smartest one here. He's happy to find solutions. That's what he wants to do. I just love that he said, we're going to fix that.
Well, he sits there and he thinks about it.
Yeah.
If he was right, you know for a fact that he'd say, here's why you're wrong. And I'd have a reason. It wouldn't just be some bluster, which you'd normally hear.
All right, so let's go back to that story about the California Coastal Commission, because I've done some research into it. I want you to watch this video, which I think is really powerful. It's just a couple minutes long, but it shows how the statements they even made are wrong. So as Alex says, the California Coastal Commission literally confessed to illegal regulatory lawfare against SpaceX and Elon Musk. Not only is what they're saying completely ridiculous, but it has absolutely nothing to do with their mandate of conserving the state's coastline. They will be sued. Elon said, totally insane. Take a look.
We are talking about SpaceX in this, and I will say, and I just want to put it out there, you know, as a person in this process, in as was mentioned earlier today, we're an appointed body. There's the politics and policy and science. They mix in these spaces. It's real. This company is owned by the richest person in the world with direct control over what could be the most extensive global communication system on the planet. And just last week, that person was speaking about political retribution on a national stage, and it was very glib, but yet he was standing next to a candidate that openly promotes and is working to normalize that language, and we have to push back against that.
Right now, Elon Musk is hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA while claiming his desire to help the hurricane victims.
I appreciate the apolitical nature under which you all work. But I do share some concern from the Commissioner. Wilson brought up because of the fact that, you know, last year we did see, you know, the owner of Starlink shut down Starlink when one of our allies was going to attack one of our adversaries.
But here we're dealing with a company that does not, that is the head of which has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race and made it clear what his point of view is. My understanding was that they would be here today on Zoom. I am very concerned that even after meeting with me, expressing my feelings.
Chair.
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. They did participate on Zoom today.
It's not the other companies. This is about SpaceX increasing their launches, not the other companies increasing their launches. So.
So then Elon went on to say the Coastal Commission has one job, take care of the California coast. It is illegal for them to make decisions based on what they mostly wrongly think are my politics. For example, I've done more for the advance of sustainable energy, blah, blah, blah. You've seen that. He then also posted this. This sounds like the sequel to Office Space. And don't forget your TPS cover sheet. I did some research because I'm like, okay, what legal basis do they have? And I found so many, and thank you, Grok, because I'm not a lawyer. So we've got Perry versus Sinderman in the Supreme Court in 1972. They held that the government may not deny a benefit to a person on a basis that infringes their constitutionally protected interests, especially freedom of speech. So what the commission said was, Elon is going around saying stuff that we don't like, so we're going to not let you do that thing. Hang on. It doesn't work that way. I worked in government for years. You can't say, I don't like you, so you can't do that thing. You have to show why legally they can't do that thing. 14th Amendment. The Equal Protection Clause requires that individuals in similar situations be treated equally by the law. So if you're going to stop SpaceX, then you got to stop the federal government from launching. Case law. In Yik Wo versus Hopkins in the Supreme Court in 1886, they ruled that laws applied to in a discriminatory manner violate the Equal Protection Clause, even if the law is fair on its face. Federal jurisdiction over aerospace activities. The FAA regulates commercial space launches under 51 U.S.C., not the California Coastal Commission. There's a supremacy clause, okay? So under Article 6 of the Constitution, federal law preempts conflicting state regulations. This is how it works. If your little town passes a law that says you can't do this, if state law says you can, then you can. The same thing goes one step up. If the state says you can't do this, but the federal law says you can't, you can't. That's how it works. So this state commission cannot say something that the federal law says you can do. So they're out of their depths here. They just don't like Elon so much that they just are doing this next one, arbitrary and capricious standards. So courts may overturn agency actions that are arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion under the administrative procedure. You can't just pick on someone because you don't like them and say you can't do this. If we flip the tables here for a second, if a Republican administration said you can't do that because you're too liberal, we would all be up in arms. The media would be all over this, but I haven't seen any of this in the mainstream media. Why? Because they all agree. They all think that Elon should be stopped because he's evil. He's launching things for the Space Force, for our government. That's why they're increasing the launches. And this Coastal Commission is like, that's bad. What?
They're not saying that's bad. They're saying he's bad.
Right.
Which is stupid.
Exactly.
That's not how it's...
And lastly, requirement for evidence-based decisions. Agencies must base their decisions on relevant factors and substantial evidence, not he's going around the country saying stuff. Yeah, he is. He's allowed to. It's called the First Amendment. And I just want to point out, where were you when other groups that, were doing things you liked, were saying things you liked, you were letting them? Do we all forget here that Mark Zuckerberg did the exact same thing in 2020? He spent millions of his own dollars to promote who he wanted to be for president, and no one stopped him because he's allowed to.
Let's flip this the other way. Let's say they all went, hey, let's let Paul McCartney start launching rockets because I really like Paul McCartney.
The Beatles are awesome.
The Beatles were awesome. Do you remember Abbey Road?
Why don't you just destroy some of our coastline while you're at it? Because we love you.
Yeah. Hey, Paul. Here's a hatchet. Right. Why don't you just have at it at our native plants and species?
Right.
No, you wouldn't do that, and no one would accept that based on the fact that you like Paul McCartney. That wouldn't work.
Exactly. I heard a lot of people this week like, California Coastline Commission does great things. I'm like, great.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That has
you
nothing
can't
to
also then do something illegal. So I'm so glad that Elon's suing them because he will win. And not only that, I mean, it's possible he could sue for damages. So let's go to this. So a lot of people are interested in the cyber cab and the limiting factor. Great YouTube channel, great X poster. Did some math here. So he analyzed the 4680 pack and he counted 810 cells from that video they put out. Mm-hmm. If the cells are 60 watt hours each, he said, which would be reasonable on the low side for LFP, then the pack would be about 48 kilowatt hours, which would definitely be on the high side of what's needed. His conclusion is I still think the pack is going to be a maximum of 40 kilowatt hours and potentially much smaller. That's based on an efficiency of 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour and about 200 miles of range. I think his efficiency numbers are a bit high. I don't think it's actually going to get 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour. I know it's probably going to go slow speeds in a lot of cities.
Well, let's talk about like Aptera, for instance. What's Aptera's claimed? It's like 99 watt hours per mile. That would be close to 10 miles per kilowatt
they have
hour.
One less tire, and they have a completely way more
efficient
a CD, coefficient of drag.
Right.
I know again that these cars aren't going to go that fast in most city situations.
Sure.
A lot of this depends on the charging speed. We saw this week that it can park wirelessly and get 24 kilowatts according to the video we saw. So we don't know if that's the limit.
With this small a battery, it does limit the charging speed.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't necessarily...
One reason why you might want to keep that higher is to have a higher charging speed.
But to make them all cheaper, you would want a smaller battery.
Right.
And I can definitely... so if it's charging at 24 kilowatts... You could charge it up in roughly 2 hours, or probably more like 3, but
that was 0 to 100.
Yeah.
But to give you some idea of what normally it would be sitting there for, would be an hour to get you roughly half your charge back.
So then if it has roughly 200 miles of range and it's in an urban setting, it seems like you'd want a variety of robotaxis. Like in more rural areas, we're going to be covering more mileage. You'd want a bigger battery.
Yeah, and I think there'll be different cabs for different situations. I think this is just a first run, like just like the Model S was the first car and then it changed. Interesting. We're getting to some interesting numbers. I do think if they could get the pack down to say 40 kilowatt hours, then again it charges faster in terms of how many batteries you have to charge, total percentage.
Yeah.
So you could be talking more like an hour and a half for say 10 to 80% or something like that, which is pretty good because I mean, these are the numbers we all need, right? We need to know how many miles a day is it traveling. If it is traveling, let's say 300 miles a day, then this is completely doable because it could park for roughly an hour and a half during, the day or night and charge up. So we're in the right ballpark. Now we just need to start seeing actual data. It's exciting. I thought we'd end with a little stand-up comedy. This is a new comedian I found on the scene. His name is Elon Musk, and he is trying out some new material. Check it out.
I mean, I got a bunch of sort of nutty stories, some of them are, I guess, kind of funny. There's, we had to do this, SpaceX had to do the study to see if Starship would hit a shark. And I'm like, it's a big ocean, There's a lot of sharks. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. And said, well, you have to, this is, I think, from National Marine Fisheries, one of the, NIMF it's called. They were like, well, you have to do the study on whether you're going to hit a shark. We're like, what? And then we said, okay, fine, we'll do the analysis. And then, well, can you give us the shark data? They're like, no, we can't give you the shark data. We're like, okay, well, then we're in a bit of a quandary. How do we solve this this shark probability issue? And they said, well, we could give it to our Western division, but we don't trust them. And I'm like, am I in a comedy sketch here? And then, like they're worried about the shark density data, like the people who hunt sharks for shark fins somehow getting their hands on this shark data. And so eventually, I think we got the data, and we could run the analysis to say, like, yeah, the sharks are going to be fine. But they wouldn't let us proceed with launch until we did this crazy shark data. And then we thought, okay, now we're done. And they said, but what about whales? I'm like, when you look at a picture of the Pacific, what percentage of the surface area of the Pacific do you see as whale? Because I look at a picture, I don't see any. It's like, where's a whale? And honestly, if the ship did hit a whale, it's like, honestly, that whale had it coming, because it's like the odds are so low. It's like Final Destination, the whale edition. It's like fate had it in for that whale, and so we have to do the whale analysis. And it's like, okay, yeah, the whales will be fine too, It goes on. And then there's like, well, what if the rocket goes underwater, then explodes, and then the whales have hearing damage? Like, this is real. This is actually, and we're like, look, if we could make a rocket go underwater and be a submarine, that would be like a feat of physics we could not accomplish, okay? This is not how it works. So anyway, just one like crazy thing after another where, so this is why I'm like really feeling the pain of the overregulation. And there's like multiple federal agencies that have overlapping, they're all doing the same thing, basically. So anyway, we got to stop this madness because we just won't be able to get anything done.
I love his new material there. Rockets hitting a shark. Oh no, that's real.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And he didn't have to write it because that's real content.
And next week he's going to talk about the SEALs that we've already told you about, that the government made him kidnap and put headphones on and play loud sounds to. It's insane because I've never heard of these things happening to, let's say, Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin. I've never heard of these things happening to ULA. They get to go, whatever, we're going to do whatever we want and shut the up. But with Elon, they have to, what ridiculous thing can we make him do? Oh, He passed the shark test. What else can we do? How about the whale test?
I also love, it's one thing to be like, we want to make sure you don't hit a shark. And then he goes, okay, give me the data on shark density. And they go, we're not going to give you that.
Right. That's top secret.
Okay, well then how am I supposed to do my study if you won't give me the proper data to do that? That's like Sally has an unknown amount of apples that we won't tell you about. How many apples does Sally have?
Right. Oh, you can't tell us, so you can't get the permit.
Right.
Yeah. It's so absurd.
It's Kafka-esque.
It is. Really, and I do wonder if one day we just got hold of the mainstream media, like the transceiver department, and we just put these stories out to the world. How long would it take for the world to go, you're doing what to this guy and to all these great companies? You're really investigating Neuralink. You don't want people to be able to solve blindness and to solve, having the ability to use your arms and legs. Like, crazy town. This isn't a guy who's trying to do something evil. He's trying to do the most awesome things for humanity. So I just wish we could get this word out. And I feel like that's part of your job. Next time you're at a dinner, bring up a story. Show them one of our posts on X or on Clips or whatever. Get more people to know this stuff, because when they do, we've seen it personally. They don't come back and yell at you. They go, "What else can you tell me this week, Bob?"
Start with the landing of the rocket.
Yeah.
Start with that. Just get really deep into that, because people get excited about that. It is an amazing thing. And the nice part is we have so many different angles of that landing.
Yep.
So pull that up on like a smart TV or your smartphone and start showing them all those different clips. They're going to need to see it at least, I would say, 5 times. At least, and then keep showing them it, because there's so much great material.
And you'll find out that things you thought they knew, they don't know.
They don't know.
So you'll have to start talking about full self-driving and Falcon 9 and all sorts of stuff.
Then show them the Wii Robot event, and then you can talk about pretty much anything, because at that point, you've broken through.
And the number one thing that'll stop you is they will say stuff like, "Why haven't I heard of this before?" And they'll look at you as if you're somehow not telling them the truth. Yeah. And that's why I just show them lots of videos.
That's where the videos come in.
It's like, I didn't make this stuff up. It's real.
And they know that you don't have that great video editing skills, no offense. But I mean, nobody does, because this stuff this would be impossible to replicate multiple camera angles of a rocket landing.
It'd be really hard for the guy that David Holtz, that is the head of Midjourney, because when he goes to a dinner party, people could be like, "You just made this up."
Exactly, because that's probably what he does. He's like, "Hey, look at this. Oh, it's a unicorn on a bicycle again. Wow, that's yeah."
Thank you so much, guys. If it weren't for you, honestly, this show and all of the work we do could not be possible. So thank you for supporting us. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Now you know.